Behind every great man, there is a great woman. Kings may rule over their kingdoms. However, every king needs a queen. Throughout history, there have been several kings and several queens. Many ruled alone, and many more lost their partner. History has taught us that an individual's mental fortitude is much greater when the responsibilities outweigh the pain of loss. The duty of a queen is not just to serve the king and kingdom. A queen must be a strong leader, diplomat, and negotiator. A queen must be able to show compassion for those in need, but also take decisive action against those who pose a threat to the integrity of the nation. There have been many young ruling queens and old ruling queens. The British Monarchy has had 62 ruling monarchs over 1200 years. Of those ruling monarchs, only 8 have been reigning queens: Mary I, Elizabeth I, Anne, Victoria, and Elizabeth II. Daughter of the ferocious King Henry VIII and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, Mary had what some would call a sad childhood. Her father notoriously divorced her mother, stripping her of all royal titles as she failed to produce a male heir. During their marriage, Henry had an affair with one of Catherine's ladies-in-waiting and fathered an illegitimate son, Henry Fitzroy, Mary's half-sibling. However, due to his being born out of wedlock, his claim to the throne was not recognized. Growing up, Mary had a poor relationship with her father after the divorce of her mother. She was removed from his will and forced to recognize that the marriage between her mother and father was illegal. Henry manipulated her into admitting this in order to add her back to the will. Henry went on to marry an additional 5 wives, with some mistresses in between. He had 3 surviving legitimate children: Mary, her half-sibling Elizabeth, and Edward. However, after the death of King Henry VIII, the only surviving male heir was Edward. Edward was crowned King Edward VI at the age of just 9 years old. King Edward VI soon died of tuberculosis at the age of 15. As Mary is a legitimate child of Henry, and there are no surviving legitimate male heirs, Mary was next in line for the throne. She became the first legitimate Queen of England in 1553, besides the short-lived rule of Lady Jane Grey, who sat on the throne as Queen of England for 9 days. Lady Jane Grey was the cousin of Edward VI. He wanted her to be his successor, as she was a Protestant like him. Many supported Mary as the rightful queen. Despite being supported, Mary quickly put forward controversial policies. She locked her half-sister Elizabeth in the Tower of London in 1554, as she feared she was plotting against her. Fortunately, she was released 2 months later that same year. Mary married Prince Philip of Spain, becoming Queen Consort of Habsburg Spain on his accession in 1556. She had the backing of the Spanish. Philip was also a Catholic. Mary believed that by giving birth to a Catholic heir, she would be able to refute her Protestant half-sister Elizabeth I's claim to the throne. Mary was a devout Catholic, just like her mother. However, she was now queen of a predominantly Protestant country. She wanted to start a counter-reformation to reconvert her subjects back to Catholicism. Mary executed 300 Protestants for what she believed to be heresy. she had them burnt at the stake. As a result of the union through marriage between England and Spain, England entered the war with the French alongside Spain, and subsequently lost Calais in 1557. After several poor harvests and the spread of influenza, sickness ran rampant during Mary's reign. Mary herself never fully recovered from her own illnesses and eventually passed away in 1558 as a result of what was believed to be a uterus cyst or cancer. Mary died with no heirs. Upon receiving the news of her sister's death from the members of the House of Lords, Elizabeth restored the country back to Protestantism. The 6 years of Catholicism were over. The following years, in which Elizabeth was queen, were known as the Elizabethan era. Queen Elizabeth brought England to the forefront of the world's economy, establishing England as a global power. During the accession, Elizabeth was greeted with bells, dancing, bonfires, and many other forms of Republic celebrations. Elizabeth was truly loved by the people, and a relief for those living in fear. It was the start of a new era, a happier time. Although, in the north, the French occupation was looming over England. Elizabeth proposed to Scotland that they oppose the French presence, as she feared this may eventually lead to an invasion. The belief was, after overthrowing Elizabeth, the French would place her Catholic cousin, Mary Queen of Scots, as the new monarch. After the Treaty of Edinburgh in 1560 and the removal of French forces in Scotland, Mary refused to recognise it. Mary, however, was imprisoned, and after an escape attempt, spent the rest of her life locked away. As Queen, Elizabeth was expected to marry and produce an heir for the throne. However, Elizabeth would be known as the Virgin Queen. She claimed she was married to God. Despite this, the Pope declared Elizabeth illegitimate, and those under her rule who were Catholic plotted against her. Thankfully, attempts on her life were prevented with the aid of a special secret service protecting her. Towards the end of Elizabeth's reign, she supported several military endeavours across the seas. Many of them were poorly managed, and ultimately had little to no impact on the conflicts they were involved in. Despite being a celebrated monarch and defeating the Spanish Armada, her popularity began to decline along with the economy. As Elizabeth aged, a successor was to be named to continue the succession. Since Elizabeth had no children, close relatives were the most suitable choice. However, in 1598, Elizabeth's senior advisor, Lord Burleigh, died, leaving his role to his son, Robert. Robert soon became the leader of the government and set out on secretly finding a suitable heir. That heir would be Mary Queen of Scots' son, James VI of Scotland. James was convinced to become the new monarch and successfully won over Elizabeth. After Elizabeth's death in 1603, James VI succeeded as King of England. Elizabeth had reigned for 45 years. Coming from a troubled childhood, Victoria never thought she could positively influence the world around her in which she has today. Throughout her childhood, Victoria lived in Kensington Palace. She described her childhood as melancholy. Her father had passed away just before she had turned 1. Victoria's mother had then developed a dependable relationship with another man, Sir John Conroy, a British Army officer who served Victoria's mother, Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld. Conroy had very much controlled Victoria, leaving her feeling isolated and very much alone. However, Victoria was destined for the throne. From a young age, her mother and other supporting adults molded her in preparation for leadership. Her mother and Sir John Conroy had created the Kensington system. This system was designed to control every aspect of Victoria's life. It was a strict set of rules that made sure she was kept in the hands of her mother and Conroy. Unfortunately for Victoria, the system set in place was a way of breaking her down enough so that she could later be manipulated and controlled. Conroy had a masterful plan to weaken her will and shroud her from reality. His plan was to take power through sole control over Victoria. Growing up, Victoria was never allowed to socialize with other children, nor was she never not by the side of her mother. When her education had begun, she was third in line for the throne. However, due to her young age, there was a high certainty she might one day inherit the throne. Her mother had set a strict daily schedule for Victoria, which had morning lessons beginning at 9:30 sharp, with a break at 11:30. Lessons would then resume at 3 in the afternoon and would continue until 5 p.m. Victoria's mother would then drill her daughter after each lesson. Over time, Victoria began to despise her mother. She had hoped that her mother would allow her the freedom to explore the outside world, which she never came to see until she became queen. In 1830, Princess Victoria's uncle William IV ascended to the throne at the age of 64. However, as he did not have any legitimate children, nor any siblings who were still alive, the next in line of succession would be Princess Victoria, his niece, daughter of his brother Prince Edward, Duke of Kent. Due to the circumstances surrounding succession, a law had to be made in order to allow Victoria's succession to be recognized legally by the government in the event that she succeeded to the throne before the age of 18. This was to be known as the Regency Act 1830. The law would permit her mother to reign on behalf of Victoria until she was old enough to reign as queen legally. Conroy and her mother wanted this regency. They wanted to obtain this power and influence and reign on behalf of Victoria. On William IV's death in 1837, Princess Victoria became queen at the age of 18. A regency was therefore avoided. Her extremely poor childhood was more than enough for the now Queen Victoria to declare that Conroy be banned from the court and that her mother lived elsewhere. Queen Victoria was coronated on the 28th of June 1838 when she was 19. Although it was a big day for the new queen, it was a ceremony that was far from perfect. The ceremony had suffered from a lack of rehearsal and only lasted 5 hours. This led to her coronation being well underprepared. Victoria married her first cousin, Prince Albert, who she grew very fond of. Albert and Victoria first met on Victoria's 17th birthday in April 1836, before she became queen. They were introduced by their uncle, Leopold I, King of the Belgians. They began to exchange written letters with each other in German, and soon their relationship began to blossom. Her strong feelings for Albert meant that she knew she wanted to spend her life with him, but tradition dictated that no one could propose to a reigning monarch. By this time, Victoria was now queen, which meant that Albert wasn't allowed to propose to Victoria. Victoria had then decided to propose to Albert. The couple was soon married on the 10th of February 1840. They had 9 children together: Princesses Victoria, Alice, Elena, Louise, and Beatrice, and Princes Albert, Alfred, Arthur, and Leopold. Despite living a now happy, fulfilled life, Prince Albert died on the 14th of December, 1861, as a result of a stomach disease. Victoria was deeply distraught and was famously wearing black for the remainder of her life. Despite this, Victoria was still one of the most celebrated monarchs in history. Her reign saw the birth of the Industrial Revolution, the expansion of the British Empire, and the birth of the modern era. At the end of her life, she was the longest reigning monarch in history, sitting on the throne for 64 years. Queen Victoria died on the 22nd of January, 1901.
But overseas, 3 kings occupied the British throne in a single year. King George departs, beloved after 25 years of rule, and walking behind his coffin in the sad procession is the new king, who is the beloved Prince of Wales. London acclaims the new king, and crowds gather for the proclamation. God save the king! But even while the proclamation still rings, Edward stands beside Mr. and Mrs. Simpson in the windows of his apartments at St. James Palace. Soon he is to tell the world of the woman I love, and for her renounce the throne. Then comes the year's 3rd king, with his Scottish wife and their 2 children, King George VI and Queen Elizabeth, and the little Princess Elizabeth, who may one day be queen.
When Prince Albert rose to power, he adopted one of his other names, George, and became King George VI.
The Duke of York becomes king, his Duchess queen, and their 2 little daughters next in line for the throne. Britain rejoices again, and today, for the first time, radio brings a new king's coronation message to the world.
Never before has a newly crowned king been able to talk to all his peoples in their own homes on the day of his coronation. And the Queen and I will always keep in our hearts the inspiration of this day.
Thus royalty endures in the greatest empire ever known. To Elizabeth, the 36-year-old queen, to the Queen Mother Mary, and to her second son, now king, go the empire's love and devotion.
During the reign of Queen Victoria, she stated she never wanted a king to rule with the name Albert. She didn't want her own beloved Albert to be overshadowed by the reign of another. So, out of respect, Prince Albert adopted his new name. King George and his wife, Queen Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, had 2 children. 2 daughters, Princess Elizabeth II and Princess Margaret. King George VI potentially had one of the most stressful experiences as king. His first year as king saw the death of one and the abdication of another before his unexpected and unprepared shift to the spotlight. In September 1939, Great Britain and the British Empire declared war on Germany. This marked the start of World War II for Britain, and the first major global conflict of George VI's reign.
With him, he may break into Africa or into Asia, but it is with us, here, in this island fortress, that he will have to reckon and settle in the end. We shall strive to resist him by land and sea. We shall be on his track wherever he goes. Our air power will continue to teach the German homeland that war is not all loot and triumph. We shall aid and stir the people of every conquered country to resistance and revolt. We shall break up and derange every effort which Hitler makes to systematize and consolidate his subjugation. He will find no peace, no rest, no halting place, no parley. And if driven to desperate hazards, he attempts the invasion of the British Isles, we shall not flinch from the supreme trial with the help of God.
King George served in the Royal Navy during the First World War. He had war experience, but now he was at the forefront of decision-making as the highest military power within the empire.
Then came the war. The king had a sad and weary task to perform. Wherever his people suffered, he came, and by his presence brought comfort and assurance in their ordeal.
Every man, woman and child played their role during the conflicts of World War II, even the royal family. Elizabeth II, the eldest daughter of King George VI and Queen Elizabeth, served her country as a mechanic and driver, driving and repairing trucks and other vehicles. After the war had ended, the king developed a heavy smoking habit, which is believed to have caused him to develop lung cancer. He later died at the age of 56 in 1952. A short reign, one filled with stress, terror, and a struggle to keep the people believing. But the reign of King George VI brought the country through one of its toughest challenges in the history of the nation. With the death of King George, his successor, Elizabeth II, stepped into his shoes as the 40th monarch of England. When Elizabeth was born, she wasn't expected to become queen. In fact, she was third in line to the throne after Prince Edward and her father. But since Edward never had any legitimately known children and soon abdicated, Elizabeth's position moved closer to becoming queen. On the 2nd of June 1953, Princess Elizabeth of York was crowned Queen Elizabeth II, the Queen of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. Queen Elizabeth II established the Commonwealth during her address to Canada on Dominion Day, also now referred to as Canada Day, in 1959. At the time, Canada was still a member of the British Empire. She said that the establishment of the Confederation of Canada on July 1, 1867 was the birth of the first independent country within the British Empire. So it also marks the beginning of that free association of independent states, which is now known as the Commonwealth of Nations. From her 21st birthday address from South Africa and through her entire reign, Queen Elizabeth II dedicated her life to serving the children of the Commonwealth.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong. But I shall not have strength to carry out this resolution alone, unless you join in it with me, as I now invite you to do. I know that your support will be unfailingly given. God help me to make good my vow, and God bless all of you who are willing to share in it.
In 1952, the Queen assumed the role of head of a Commonwealth from her late father, King George VI. Her father was the first monarch to hold this title before his passing in 1952.
As the head of the Commonwealth, to address us.
Prime Minister Muscat, Prime Minister May, Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen. Having on so many occasions been welcomed to opening ceremonies around the Commonwealth, it is a pleasure this time to welcome you to my own home. Here at Buckingham Palace in 1949, my father met the heads of government when they ratified the London Declaration, which created the Commonwealth as we know it today, then comprising just 8 nations.
She toured the nations of the Commonwealth and engaged with the cultures she was bringing together through this union. Queen Elizabeth gave birth to 4 children during her lifetime with her husband Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Charles, Princess Anne, Prince Andrew, and Prince Edward. The birth of Prince Charles came when Elizabeth was Princess Elizabeth on the 14th of November 1948. 2 years later, Princess Elizabeth gave birth to her first and only daughter, Princess Anne, on the 15th of August 1950. When Princess Elizabeth was crowned queen, she proceeded to have 2 more children, Andrew and Edward. She would become the first reigning monarch to give birth in 100 years. Andrew was born on the 19th of February 1960, and Edward on the 10th of March 1964. Queen Elizabeth was the longest reigning monarch in British history, exceeding the previous record of her great-great-grandmother, Queen Victoria, who was on the throne for an astonishing 65 years. She passed that record in 2018 and celebrated her Platinum Jubilee in 2022, celebrating 70 years on the throne. 70 years of dedicated service to the nation and Commonwealth realms.
My lords and members of the House of Commons, you do Prince Philip and me a great honour in inviting us here today. I am most grateful to have this opportunity to reply to your loyal addresses. And I thank you both, Lord Chancellor and Mr. Speaker, for your generous words. I would like to pay tribute to the work you do in this, the Mother of Parliaments, where you, like so many famous predecessors before you, have assembled to confront the issues of the day, to challenge each other and address differences through debate and discussion, and to play your essential part in guiding this kingdom through the changing times of the past 50 years. For if a jubilee becomes a moment to define an age, then for me we must speak of change, its breadth and accelerating pace over these years. Since 1952, I have witnessed the transformation of the international landscape through which this country must chart its course. The emergence of the Commonwealth, the growth of the European Union, the end of the Cold War, and now the dark threat of international terrorism. This has been matched by no less rapid developments at home, in the devolved shape of our nation, in the structure of society, in technology and communications, in our work, and in the way we live. Change has become a constant. Managing it has become an expanding discipline. The way we embrace it defines our future. It seems to me that this country has advantages to exploit in this exciting challenge. We in these islands have the benefit of a long and proud history. This not only gives us a trusted framework of stability and continuity to ease the process of change, but it also tells us what is of lasting value. Only the passage of time can filter out the ephemeral from the enduring. And what endure are the characteristics that mark our identity as a nation and the timeless values that guide us. These values find expression in our national institutions, including the monarchy and parliament. Institutions which in turn must continue to evolve if they are to provide effective beacons of trust and unity to succeeding generations.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong. But I shall not have strength to carry out this resolution alone unless you join in it with me, as I now invite you to do. I know that your support will be unfailingly given. God help me to make good my vow, and God bless all of you who are willing to share in it.
The Queen had been on the throne from the age of 25. Although she was not quite the youngest monarch to obtain the crown, she would be the longest reigning queen, ruling the country through 15 prime ministers and several global catastrophes. In 2021, 1 year before the celebration, the Queen's beloved husband, Prince Philip, passed away on the 9th of April 2021 during the global pandemic. After dedicating her life to her duty as Queen, Queen Elizabeth II passed away at her home in Balmoral Castle on the 8th of September 2022, leaving Prince Charles, who was next in line, King.